is the home of Shakespeare, football, and mushy peas. It's a place of happy valleys and friends in the north. It's gritty, outlandish, it's a cracker. If it has a heartbeat, you'll find it here.
Oh, sorry, this stream was delayed not once but twice because the last episode of The Crown is quite the length. It's not the usual 50 minutes. I think it was actually about an hour and 20 minutes. So it was quite the length. I binge watched all 6 episodes today, and that's a bit of a tradition that I always watch The Crown as soon as it opens. In fact, for the first couple of seasons, it actually premiered, if I remember rightly, I think it premiered just after midnight, and I would be straight on the telly. Big fan of the show since season 1, and this is the final season. I'm going to share my thoughts on that in a moment about what that really means. But they have given it a very final ending. Yeah, and it probably ends in the right place considering where we're at in terms of historical narrative and the distance between then and now and real events. But I'll get into all that in a second. Just want to say thanks to Keith E paying a super chat. Bought me some Maltesers. I do like Maltesers, Keith. How did you know? Thank you very much. Darth Plato popped in earlier, and Desert Phoenix is here. Miss Martin's Muses also here. Thank you very much for popping in. If you're new to the channel, I don't just review things. I also interview people in the industry. I have done 45 interviews to date. I have got another one with character actor Tim Bentic next Monday in the afternoon. Bit of an unusual time. Do tune in for that. That will be my last interview of 2023. And I already have 2 interviews booked for 2024, including confirmed today first assistant director Dennis Maguire, who worked on films like Black Rain with Ridley Scott, Evita with Alan Parker, The Soldier movie with Kurt Russell and Jason Isaacs. He also worked on Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. This man has done a really impressive array of pictures. But before we get into The Crown, there is a shout out I want to do. I meant to do it on my stream yesterday, but I already had sort of one in remembrance, I guess you would call it, thing to shout out. I doing 2 on one stream felt a bit too much. So recently this week, we lost a man who was a big part of my childhood growing up. And that is the artist Ian Gibson. Now, Ian was actually one of my favorite artists for the comic 2000 AD. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of his art quickly. And I do appreciate this is a Crown stream, so just bear with me for going off topic just for a moment, if you would be so kind. It's all in a good cause. Yeah, I'll take that down for the moment. So this is some of Ian's work. He did Robo Hunter, several Judge Dredd strips, and a whole load of other. This is Progue 451, so quite early in 2000 AD's run. But I really always loved his artwork. And if you go on to, I think it's GoFundMe, his son had to do a crowdfunder to try and raise the funeral expenses, which they could not afford for the late, great Ian Gibson. I'm pleased to say that the response to that appeal has been very successful, and they hit their £5,000 target yesterday. But if you were a fan of Ian Gibson or 2000 AD, you might want to go and check that out. Personally, he was one of my favourite artists, along with Equizera. I just want to extend my condolences to the family, and especially to his son, who I spoke to yesterday. So that's just a quick shout out to the late, great Ian Gibson, who we lost this week, who sadly passed away, artist for 2000 AD. Let's talk about The Crown. Okay, so season 6, the final season, and I just literally finished watching episode 10 about 5 minutes ago. I had to put this stream back 3 times because the episode was longer than I thought. Now, the last 6 episodes, obviously the first 4 episodes of season 6 very much focus on Diana, the car crash, and the events immediately afterwards. I'm just going to talk through the bare bones of the episodes that you get here. Episode 5 really centers on William dealing with his grief in the immediate years afterwards. I mean, it's set a few years afterwards, of course. There is a bit of a time jump. We have older actors playing William and Harry. I'm going to talk about them later. But it really does focus on William, the relationship he has with his father, and to a lesser extent, Harry as well. And that is episode 5. Episode 6 is the popularity of Tony Blair, how he's more popular than the monarchy. His nickname is King Tony. He gets involved, of course, in the conflict in Kosovo, does a very good speech at the Chicago Convention in America, calling for not just America, but other countries to get involved. And so he's kind of riding high. And this forces the Queen to reevaluate how the monarchy are perceived, and also reevaluate how much money they spend on the monarchy. And so, and I didn't know this, that she actually got, and I've checked, and this is true, that she actually got Tony Blair's team to do an assessment on how the monarchy could change or be improved. And then there's a really interesting montage of scenes that explores what would seem to the layman to be a number of quite irrelevant positions within the royal household that maybe could have been done away with in order to save money. There's one guy, for example, whose sole job it is to look after the swans in the royal parks. There's another person whose sole job is to look after the glassware in all the royal stately homes, particularly pertaining to things like state home dinners and formal occasions, this kind of thing, to ensure the glasses are all clean and that they match and broken ones are replaced and so on. And these are all areas of specialty that these individuals have. That was very interesting for me because I didn't realize they I mean, I know that they employ a huge team, but I didn't realize that there are generational families who've literally been in the service of the royal household for years, and their sole skill set is around this particular job that's been passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. That's quite a fascinating piece of information. And yeah, I mean, does it make good drama? Well, it's interesting. It's insightful. So that is episode 6. Episode 7 really kind of covers the first early buds of William and Kate Middleton's early meetings, their relationship, how it starts, and so on. And that really is the focus of episode 7. Episode 8, I was a bit worried about what they were going to do here, because we have already had a movie that flashes, but that tells the story of when the Queen and Margaret, of course she wasn't the Queen at the time, kind of did a runner from the Royal Palace on the night of VE Day and went on a bit of a yomp around London, purportedly some of which took place in the Ritz Hotel, where they partied until the early morning hours, and quite rightly so, in my opinion. It was the end of World War II, after all. So, yeah, I mean, that's all well and good. But we have already had a movie about that, and I was a little concerned that the whole episode was going to be preoccupied with that flashback, and we were going to get a 1940s story, which of itself wouldn't have been a bad thing. The problem is we've already had a movie that's done exactly that. So I didn't really want to see that again. Fortunately, the flashbacks are quite minimal, and really this is to establish that one of the reasons that Margaret and Elizabeth have such a special relationship is because Margaret has seen the fun side of Elizabeth before she was queen. She never forgets it, and she knows that that's who she was once, but that's not who she is allowed to be now. So it focuses really on the failing health of Princess Margaret, her first stroke, friendship with the Queen, and so on. Now, one of the events that takes place during this episode is 9/11, which, I mean, just on a global scale alone, was a huge, huge, huge event. We kind of see about it really through Margaret's eyes, where she witnesses it on television, and there's a brief discussion of it in another scene. When you consider the amount of screen time that in previous seasons, global political events such as the Suez Crisis, for example, have been given in an episode, I was quite surprised that 9/11 was reduced to this almost arbitrary mention. All felt very remote and very abstract. And maybe it was for the royal family, but I don't think so. And I kind of wanted to see their reaction, because that was a mark moment in history where terrorism reached a new level on the global stage. And of course, it was followed by our own tragedies in the years that would come. So with 7/7 and so on, and I mean the timeline of The Crown only goes up to 2005, so I'm not criticizing it for not including that. But I think I would have liked to have seen a scene which at least had them discussing those events, and just got a bit more insight into the royal family's reaction. But we don't really get that. And I felt for an event that big, I felt we should have seen it. Also, one of the characters that we met earlier in the show, this is a bit of a spoiler alert, known as Porchy, who ended up being, I think he was the head of the stables for the Queen, but a childhood friend. And I think he was probably somebody who was in love with Queen Elizabeth from afar, known her all his life. I didn't know this, but he actually, when he saw the events of 9/11, later that day, they gave him a heart attack and he died at home in front of the TV. Now, that scene is not depicted in episode 8, but it is mentioned. So, I mean, we feel the impact on the family in that sense. But again, it's all very quick. It's very brushed over in favour of screen time being given to Princess Margaret's health deterioration, and played by the excellent Leslie Manville, of course, and so on. I just wanted a bit more, but it's not a big criticism, but it's just one thing that I was kind of expecting to see that I didn't. That's episode 8. Quite a lot happens in episode 8. Episode 9, kind of focuses again more on sort of the developing relationship of Kate and William, and the new inquiry that Al-Fayed basically he pushed for it very hard. I know quite a lot about that because I know the lawyer who represented the Al-Fayeds in that case. And so, of course, there's a police investigation and various things are looked into in terms of theories about what may or may not have caused the events in Paris. And ultimately, we get the conclusions of that investigation at the end of episode 9. The Second War of Iraq is mentioned, and we begin to see the downfall of the popularity of Tony Blair. We don't see him leaving office, which is something of a shame, because he is a prime minister who in my country will only be remembered for one thing, and that's taking us to war with Iraq. So on the grounds of very, very shoddy intelligence. So in episode 10, there's a bit more of Blair being under fire. The 45 minutes thing is briefly mentioned in a scene. That's the intelligence that said that Saddam had the means to fire weapons at Europe within 45 minutes, which was complete and utter nonsense. All turned out to be bullshit. But most of the episode focuses around Charles wanting to finally marry Camilla, which is handled really well, and Operation London Bridge, which was the code name, of course, in case the Queen died, and her being forced to sit in on very detailed discussions of her own funeral, which of course must have happened and must have been extremely bizarre for her. There's more development on Kate and William's relationship, and we start, certainly in episodes 9 and 10, we begin to feel the tension between Harry and William and the differences. William beginning to lean in more towards being reserved and handling things more maturely, and Harry being more sort of immediate and active and occasionally thoughtless and irresponsible. And the episode with the unfortunate choice of costume at a party is covered, and it's well handled. It's well handled. The ending, which I don't want to spoil it too much, but we do have several scenes, in fact, where the other versions of the Queen, played by the wonderful Claire Foy, and oh my God, why's her name gone out? Olivia Colman, National Treasure, gone out of my head for a moment there. The younger versions are talking to Imelda Staunton and debating with her whether she should continue her reign or step back while she's still alive and let Charles ascend to the throne. And I do believe serious consideration was given to her doing that. Those scenes are for me are a little bit problematic. I personally would have rather have seen her debate those questions with other characters who exist in the timeline. But I'm what they're trying to say with the show, and I don't believe it's a mistake. It's just a personal choice. Is that this is a question she must have asked herself and debated with herself in her own company many times about maybe stepping back and so on, and looking at what other royal families had done in the Netherlands, Norway, and where it's often the case that people didn't necessarily wait to die until the rite of ascension took place. They would often step back and let a younger royal ascend to the throne. So that's really what you're going to get in the final season. And then I think the very ending is quite well handled. We also see the Queen's speech at Charles and Camilla's wedding. And I'm not sure if I was aware of the speech that she gave or the content of it until I watched this show, and I'm sure it must be pretty accurate. But it's quite moving and quite funny. And I think in that speech, what happens is she reclaims quite a bit of her humanity. That is extremely well handled in the show, and extremely well acted by the wonderful Imelda Staunton, who probably has had the most difficult job of the three actresses, because I think the Queen that she's playing is the one that we're all familiar with, at least in terms of on the television, and has been around for the lives of most people I know, but also probably the hardest to get to know. Whereas, you know, the Queen of Olivia Colman's era, for example, we would often see her ride horses in parades and this kind of thing. So there's a whole different dynamic there, you know. And I have to, well, let's talk about the cast. Overall, I have to say that I thought the season was good. It's a strong finish. Hard to give it a rating out of 10 at this time. I need to watch it again. I won't rate it now, but it's a strong finish. I feel some really important issues that take place in that time were skirted over, that got a lot of, whereas other not as important issues, political issues, got a lot less screen time. I mean, for example, the protest in London against the war in Iraq was the biggest that the country had ever seen. It was huge. It was huge. I mean, you couldn't join, you know, one end of the queue of it, while the other end of the queue, or the other end of the march had already reached its finish, but it was still going at the start. You know, it was miles, 10 miles long or whatever. Millions of people there, millions. And I'm sure the royal family would have had comment about that in private, and I would have. That's very glossed over in one scene with Tony Blair. I understand it's not going too well over there. You know, that's kind of like that. And that's kind of really all we get. So there are some things, I think that and 9/11, which were two really big consequences of human action in the time in which Elizabeth reigned our country. I would have liked to have seen her personal reaction. I would have liked to have seen a conversation between her and her husband about those topics, as we had seen in other seasons. You know, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more there, but you know, we got what we got. So cast, yeah, I've already talked about Imelda Staunton. Jonathan Pryce is brilliant in this. It's probably one of the best roles of his career. He's perfectly cast and does an extremely good job capturing the humor of his character really well, which is not easy. I want to talk about Ed McVeigh, and here he is. How well timed. So I remember when the casting call went out for people to play William and Harry. I think it was a couple of years ago. God, was it that long already? And they were looking for kids to play them, younger and old. And I think we've had three actors play them each. And the casting's been very good. I've already talked about the actors who played them younger. Ed McVeigh, who's not an actor I'm familiar with, does an extremely good job of playing the difficult mantle that William inherited, as well as coping with all the attention he got. There's one scene that I found really moving, and it's in episode 5. He returns to school, and there's a box of letters waiting for him. I think about 600 of them from all the boys at Eton. I think it's Eton that he went to. And, some of them are in the years above, some of them are in the years below. And they've all sent him a personal message of condolence. And we hear some of them read out loud. And then there's another sack full of mail or two from letters from all over the world. And he gets, a couple more of these sacks on Valentine's Day and stuff like that. And it's all a bit overwhelming. Luther Ford, I'm not familiar with him either. He plays Harry. I had a flatmate who looked a bit like that once. He's pretty good. He's given a bit of a raw deal with the script, in the sense that Harry's still quite immature in the timeline that we're concerned with. He's getting in a lot of trouble, smoking pot, drinking too much, and so on. Clashing with his father, and occasionally clashing with William, but they do have a very strong bond. I think the actor does a perfectly good job with the stuff that he's given. I feel that the writers could have played his character with a bit more nuance. But it's good. He's conflicted about his mother. Isn't happy that his dad's remarrying because he knows it will be a very public thing. So there's, it's a difficult role to play for a young actor, but he does a good job. Olivia Williams is amazing as Camilla. She is bang on, so spot on. I've met Olivia actually at the premiere of Wild Bill, and she was lovely. Meg Bellamy, also an actress I'm not familiar with, plays Kate Middleton. She plays a very straight, quite sort of. There's a setup scene where a younger version of her meets William with Diana, selling the big issue. Now, I don't know if that really took place. I haven't actually Googled that, so I really don't know. It's quite a nice device to suggest that she kind of liked him from afar when she was in her teens. There's suggestion that the mother kind of engineered it a bit, that they would go to the same colleges and things, and that they might meet because she knew her daughter had feelings for him. They don't get together straight away. Their road's a little bit more complex than that. I think the way that their relationship is handled in the show is done really well. And the actors have really good chemistry. And that's really important because this whole storyline with them, which probably of the last 5 episodes probably forms, I don't know, kind of 30% of the screen time. So it's important that they got these actors right, and the casting director did a really good job. Leslie Manville, well, what can I say? The woman who called me and left a lovely long message on my answer phone at home after reading a script of mine once. Thank you for that, Leslie. I'll never forget it. She's just amazing in this. She's having a lot of fun with the role. Embodies who Margaret was. I think Margaret would be very pleased with her performance. Bertie Carvel as Tony Blair is an odd one because we've seen so many other actors play Tony Blair, and I think anybody who gets cast as Blair, it's a really difficult mantle because Michael Sheen probably did the definitive job of Blair in The Queen, and I think he's reprised the role at least on one other occasion, if I remember rightly. So it's tough, for someone else to step into those shoes. But he's got his mannerisms and his voice, as Blair down to a T. So he does a good job. It's pretty convincing. I remember this photo opportunity because this photograph of the three of them appeared on the front of several newspapers, and I have a vague recollection of that at the time. And then we're going back to the earlier episodes. So yeah. So this is just a gut reaction video. So it's not a chew the fat episode where we talk for a couple of hours and I have other guests on. This is just me with my own thoughts. It's a good 5 episodes. I think of just looking at my notes. I think probably episode 5 and episode 10 were probably the strongest for me. There was a weird kind of dream sequence that the Queen has of Tony Blair being crowned king and all the rest of it. I totally didn't buy into that at all. I thought that was completely unnecessary, and I would have rather have seen the screen time. I think if I've got a criticism of this final season, it's leaned a bit too much into the fanciful. The scenes with Dodi Fayed talking to his dad, you know, the ghost of him, the ghost of Diana talking to the Queen in early episodes. And then here we kind of have younger versions of herself talking to her. I don't really buy into those scenes. For me, they take, because this show feels real. I know it's not going to be historically accurate. I know that some bits of it will be made up and all the rest of it, but this is a show about real people who do exist. So it feels real. It feels like it's a window into these people's lives. Once we start introducing ghosts and people having conversations with younger versions of themselves, unless that's in some sort of dementia context, for me, that kind of undermines the seriousness, the guts of the drama, and it brings it down a little bit. So if I have a main criticism, it's that. Now, those scenes are not prevalent enough to take away from what is an absolutely fantastic piece of television drama. This is a show made by people at the top of their game, top level directors, probably one of the best ensemble casts that's ever been lined up for a show, for any drama show. Beautifully shot with good use of locations, and will no doubt be a show that is enjoyed by many generations to come, which will increase the interest in not only the royal family, but also historical events that they were connected to, or big historical events that occurred during the Queen's reign. And I think, yes, you're right. That film was called A Special Relationship. That's the second time he played A Special Relationship. So, yeah, overall, very solid show, good finish. I'll say one more thing before I go, and that is, whilst this might be the end of this version of The Crown, anybody who doesn't think that there's going to be a drama series at some point in the future telling the story of all the stuff that took place after this timeline, but before the Queen's death, I'm talking about the conflicts between Harry and William particularly, and also, of course, Harry is his marriage and moving to Los Angeles, all of that stuff. A drama show about that period is absolutely 100% inevitable. It's definitely going to be made by someone. It might be a mini series. You know, it probably won't be this team. I think this team have definitively closed the book on this. But who has the rights to the show? I mean, Netflix probably that they may have the rights to the show in 10 years' time. If they want to do another season, they may well have those rights. I don't know. But if anybody thinks this is the last that we've seen on dramas about the royal family, you are absolutely deluding yourself, because people will always watch them because they'll be interested. And one of the most dramatic periods of stories surrounding them takes place in the events after the last episode. So I'm sure that that show will be made at some point in the future. As for the real William and Harry, I wish them well. I can't even imagine how complex and difficult it is to live the life that they have led. But I'm also grateful to the team of The Crown for giving us a small insight into the minutiae of what goes on behind the scenes in terms of running the royal family, as well as the actual internal drama and politics that took place, regardless of how accurate or inaccurate it is. And I take it all with a pinch of salt. I don't assume that I'm always seeing the truth. But did it make for good television? Absolutely. My name is Lance Nilsson from the Outcast Creative. Those are my thoughts on the final season of The Crown. I will be back next week with a ton of streams. I have an interview on Monday with Tim Bentic, actor Tim Bentic. I have got the YouTubers movie and TV quiz this Tuesday coming up. Sorry, this Sunday coming up. That's on Sunday, the quiz. So, yeah, just going to put this information up here. Then on Monday evening at 9 p.m, we're doing the comedy review of the 1996 version of Napoleon, starring Martin Weir. And then I'm doing the last episode of the Nielsen ratings on Tuesday. I believe I'm doing a brief Christmas show on Christmas Day in the evening. So I'm going to pop on for a little bit, say hi. But yeah, that's it from me on The Crown. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for people tuning in. Thanks for the comments. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Do check out the industry interviews. There's a ton of them and there's a load more to come. And I'll see you all again real soon. Take care.